43 Purple Hearts. None of them had been opened. March 1945, near Mainz, Germany. Robert Hayes unlocked a filing cabinet before morning inspection. Robert Hayes, Philadelphia, age 27. He'd been a depot records clerk for 18 months. He'd seen missing manifests, duplicate casualty lists, and unsigned burial forms, but he'd never seen combat medals locked away from wounded men. The depot had received 3 truck convoys before sunrise. Most of the crates held blankets and plasma kits. One cabinet held medals. Hayes pulled the first case from the bottom drawer. Dark blue box, white ribbon seal still intact. Then another, then another. There were 43 of them, all unopened. Rain hit the depot roof. The replacement depot processed wounded infantry from units crossing east of the Rhine. Men arrived without jackets, without rifles, sometimes without paperwork. The medals stayed inside the cabinet anyway. Hayes checked the registry sheet clipped beside the drawer. Each medal had a typed name beside it. 21 names already carried confirmed wound dates, 0 signatures approving release. He looked back at the cabinet, then at the casualty form stacked beside the typewriter. Nobody touched the medals. This is what Patton said. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe. We tell the stories about World War II that paperwork, silence, and official reports tried to bury. The medals had arrived 11 days earlier. They came from a logistics depot outside Verdun with replacement ribbons, campaign stars, and 200 Bronze Star certificates waiting for unit verification. The Purple Hearts were different. Those required wound confirmation through official medical channels. The problem started after the Rhine crossings. By March 1945, Third Army units were moving too fast for normal casualty processing. Aid stations collapsed into temporary barns. Surgical tents moved every 24 hours. Some infantrymen were treated beside roads instead of hospitals. Records disappeared. So did signatures. The replacement depot near Mainz handled more than 400 personnel movements in 1 week. Medics filed reports by flashlight. Drivers carried casualty lists folded inside ration tins to keep them dry. The paperwork lagged behind the wounds. Rain kept falling. Army regulations required documented medical treatment before a Purple Heart could be issued. The depot major enforced that rule exactly as written. If one form was missing, the medal stayed locked. That was the argument. Fraud had happened before, during 1944 alone. Inspectors found 17 questionable wound claims routed through rear area hospitals in France. One investigation uncovered 3 soldiers requesting duplicate awards using copied treatment slips. The major knew those numbers, so he stopped everything. 43 medals stored, 0 medals issued. The contrast spread through the depot quickly. Infantry replacements waiting for transport heard rumors before breakfast. Men recovering from shrapnel wounds asked why their names stayed inside filing cabinets while other units pinned medals directly onto bandages near the front. Nobody answered clearly. A corporal from the 5th Infantry Division arrived that afternoon carrying discharge papers stained brown from river water. He had stitches running across the left side of his neck. No Purple Heart waited for him. The clerk at the counter checked 3 ledgers before closing the folder again. Treatment location not verified, he said. The corporal stood there another few seconds. Then he picked up his papers and walked back outside. The depot doors stayed open behind him. Sergeant Michael Dunn from the depot mail section carried 3 casualty envelopes into records that afternoon. He saw the Purple Heart boxes stacked beside the cabinet. "Those still here?" he asked. Robert Hayes slid one file across the desk. The wound date matched a Rhine crossing casualty report. Dunn checked the form twice. The surgeon's signature line was blank. A truck engine rattled outside. "You can send them now," Dunn said. Hayes shook his head once. The major already refused. Dunn closed the file carefully. Then he walked out. Went straight to Major Edwin Parker. Nobody stopped him. Major Edwin Parker, Cleveland, age 41. He'd been a depot administration officer for 6 years. He'd seen forged transfer papers, miscounted ammunition trains, and entire casualty rosters rewritten after artillery strikes. But he'd never seen combat medals locked away from wounded men. Parker received the report at 16:40. By then, the depot had identified 31 of the 43 names through unit transfer records alone. 22 soldiers had already rejoined active formations. 4 were hospitalized farther east near Darmstadt. 2 were dead. The room stayed silent. One file held more than casualty numbers. Private William Mercer from Atlanta carried a wound date from March 24th, 1945. Shrapnel entered below the shoulder during mortar fire near Oppenheim. The field medic who treated him never filed the final hospital transfer because his evacuation jeep was destroyed crossing a pontoon bridge later that night. Mercer survived. The paperwork did not. Parker opened another file. Same problem. Then another. 39 incomplete medical confirmations, 4 complete ones, 43 locked medals. Captain Lewis Grant entered the office carrying updated transfer sheets. "We cannot issue decorations without verification," Grant said. Parker looked at the casualty list spread across the desk. "The wounds are verified." Grant removed his gloves slowly. "The records aren't. Rainwater moved down the outside window. If we break procedure once," Grant said, "the depot loses control of the entire awards process." Parker turned one Purple Heart case over in his hand. The ribbon seal remained untouched. Outside, replacement infantry boarded trucks heading east toward Frankfurt. "They already bled," Parker said. Grant did not answer immediately. Then he pointed towards the unsigned forms. "And somebody still has to prove it." The report moved higher that evening, but the cabinet stayed locked. Colonel Thomas Ridley received Parker's report shortly after midnight together with new casualty summaries from the 90th Infantry Division. The numbers matched too closely to ignore. 43 unopened Purple Hearts inside one depot. 87 wounded personnel across 3 divisions still listed as pending verification. 9 field treatment stations destroyed or relocated during the Rhine advance between March 22nd and March 28th. Ridley understood what that meant immediately. The army had outrun its own paperwork. A legal officer from headquarters reviewed the files before dawn. "If this becomes standard practice," he said, "every disputed wound claim in Europe comes through this office." Ridley stood beside the cabinet while the clerk unlocked it again. The medals filled 3 shelves now. No one touched them. The legal officer lowered his voice. "You issue these without documentation. And someone in Paris starts asking questions by next week." Ridley looked down at the casualty summaries, then at the names attached to unopened boxes. One line on the transfer sheet carried a notation beside Mercer. "William, returned to duty. No medal issued." Ridley closed the cabinet himself. He signed one forwarding order at 05:12. His hand paused before the final signature line. By the next morning, it was sitting on Patton's desk. The cabinet inventory arrived with 14 pages of casualty paperwork. Patton read every page himself. March 1945. 3rd Army Headquarters. A single desk lamp stayed on while clerks moved through the hallway outside. The medals were listed by serial number, one line at a time. 43 unopened Purple Hearts, 39 incomplete files, 9 destroyed treatment stations, 2 dead soldiers still waiting for award confirmation. Patton read the Mercer file twice. Then he stopped at the casualty map attached behind it. The Rhine crossing routes had been marked in blue pencil. Several medical evacuation roads simply ended mid-line, where artillery strikes cut communication. The report explained everything, without saying it directly. Combat had moved faster than administration. A staff colonel entered the office carrying additional regulations from Army Awards Command. "The procedures exist for a reason," he said. Patton kept reading. The room stayed quiet for several seconds. Outside, truck engines moved across wet gravel. "If this spreads," the colonel continued, "every depot commander in France starts improvising standards." Patton turned one page, then another. He reached the witness statements from field medics near Oppenheim. Several signatures were incomplete. One statement ended halfway through the sentence because the medic had been evacuated himself after mortar fire. Patton placed the paper flat against the desk. "What happened to the men?" he asked. The colonel looked down at the casualty summary. Most returned to duty. Patton leaned back slightly in the chair. "How many?" 22 confirmed. A clerk entered carrying the physical medal cases inside a wooden transfer crate. The seals were still intact. Patton looked at the top row for a long time. No one spoke. Rain tapped softly against headquarters windows. Then Patton reached for one unopened case and placed it beside the casualty report. The colonel watched him carefully. Patton finally looked up. "Bring me the depot major," he said. The depot major arrived at headquarters before noon. He carried 3 regulation binders under his arm. Outside, rainwater still covered the motor pool roads. Inside, the wooden crate holding the Purple Heart sat unopened beside Patton's desk. 43 names, 43 sealed cases, 0 medals issued. Nobody sat down. The tent stayed silent. Patton opened the top binder first. Award procedures, medical verification requirements, signature authority tables. Then he closed it again. He looked at the depot major. "You followed the regulation exactly," Patton said. The major nodded once. "Yes, sir." Patton rested one hand beside the unopened medal case and the wounded men. The major looked towards the casualty sheets. Several files were incomplete. No one moved. Patton looked down at the stack of Purple Hearts, then at the Rhine casualty map beside them. "The wounds happened before the paperwork failed," he said. The room stayed still. Then Patton spoke again. "Bleeding counts before paperwork." Flat voice, barely above a whisper. Rain struck the canvas roof overhead. The depot major lowered his eyes toward the medal crate but said nothing immediately. One clerk near the back wall removed his glasses slowly. Another officer stopped turning pages halfway through a report. Nobody argued the regulation anymore. Patton picked up the top Purple Heart case himself. "How many men already returned to duty?" he asked. 22 confirmed. "Sir." "And the dead?" 2. Patton held the unopened medal a few seconds longer. Then he handed it across the desk. "Issue every confirmed combat wound before sunset." The depot major accepted the case with both hands. No raised voices, no lecture, just numbers changing direction. By 18:40 that evening, all 43 medals had been issued or transferred directly to unit commands. 2 depot clerks connected to the duplicate signature policy were reassigned the next morning. Within 48 hours, Third Army replacement depots stopped requiring secondary administrative approval when combat treatment records were partially destroyed during active operations. The cabinet stayed empty after that. Robert Hayes remained at the depot until July 1945. Years later, he still remembered the silence after the sentence more than the sentence itself. Nobody in the room looked relieved, just tired. The phrase spread quietly through replacement depots over the next several months. Clerks repeated it when records arrived damaged from combat zones. Some officers hated it. Others kept copies of the Rhine casualty orders folded inside personnel manuals. The argument never disappeared completely. Neither did the medals. William Mercer survived the war. He went home to Atlanta, Georgia, in 1946. In 1983, he was interviewed for a regional veterans documentary produced by Georgia Public Television. He said, "I remember opening the box inside a transport truck. The ribbons smelled like wet canvas because everything around us was soaked. Nobody talked much. One man just kept turning the medal over in his hands like he couldn't believe somebody remembered." Mercer died in 1994 at the age of 71. His family later donated the Purple Heart and transport papers to a local military history museum outside Atlanta. Today, the replacement depot site near Mainz no longer exists in its wartime form. If you visit the National WWII Museum archives in New Orleans, you can see original Third Army casualty processing forms from March 1945. Including incomplete evacuation records tied to Rhine operations. In his diary, Patton wrote, "Sometimes men survive battle only to disappear inside systems built to count them. The war moved too fast for perfect paperwork." That was true, but military awards also carried trust. Once command stopped verifying wounds completely, the meaning behind the medal itself could collapse. Both sides understood the danger. Only one side believed the waiting had already gone too far. Would you have delayed the medals until every form matched, or said what Patton said? Let us know in the comments. If this story stayed with you, the full Patton playlist is linked below. Every episode goes deeper into the decisions that defined the war. The next video follows a young assistant chaplain in frozen Alsace who watched 14 Jewish soldiers left outside a locked chapel during a blizzard in January 1945.